And I don't think people are leaving bad managers. I think people are leaving bad businesses and understand the value of having strong employee voice, a culture of openness, giving people the courage to speak and the freedom to speak. People make the mistake of looking at the data and really looking at the numbers without looking at the sentiment behind it, because if you can fix the sentiment, you'll have a much bigger impact.
I have read so much research that suggests that people leave their jobs because of their managers. However, there are other reasons, and maybe more overwhelming reasons. Today, we welcome Maureen, who is entrepreneur, HR, recruitment expert, all-round wonderful person, and she's come to talk to us about MySay, which is her platform, technology platform for new starter and exit interviews. And some of the insights might tell us a different story. Let's have a chat. Hi, Mo. Thanks for joining us.
Hiya. Well, thanks
Nice
for
to
having me.
Could we start off just hearing a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah. So, well, I'm Mo Brown, and I've actually got two businesses, but I'm here just to talk about one of them today. But I do have a HR recruitment business called Sullivan Brown, and that's actually where MySay grew out of, which is why I always mention it when I'm talking about MySay. But what I'm here to talk about today is all about MySay Sweet Spot. So my second business, MySay, which is newer, we are an employee research business. So we are a partner that you can outsource your listening strategy to, essentially different elements of your listening strategy, whether that be new starter interviews and surveys, exit interviews and surveys, stay interviews and surveys. And we do that through a mixture of a platform that we've built, so a survey platform which gives real-time dashboards and information, but also we have people that do telephone exit interviews, starter interviews and conversations, and we do in-person focus groups. So we specialize really in helping companies hear their employees, I suppose is how you would sum it up.
Thank you. That's brilliant. So, I think everybody knows one of my bugbears is that I don't think enough employers do listen to their employees, and
Hmm.
kind of make assumptions on the kind of people they want to attract, the reasons why people leave, and probably on performance kind of issues as well, without actually speaking to the people on the floor. And also, I think that when they do attempt and tick the box of exit interviews, for example. Well, quite often they're not effective. And I was just wondering if you could give your point of view as to why they might not be effective in a lot of organisations.
Oh my goodness, that is a really massive question. But I think, do you know what? I think there's a number of reasons. I think, firstly, to be fair to HR teams, and I love HR people. I literally spend my whole life talking to HR people in general, and I love the people profession. But I think there's a lot of things that fall under the remit of a HR team that shouldn't. And I think exit interviews is absolutely one of them. I think HR people are brilliant at loads of things, and they're usually really positively intended about wanting people at work to have a great experience. But exit interviews, in particular, if you take that as a case in point, and starter interviews to a degree, but let's just focus on exit interviews, because I just think they're a massively underutilized tool for every area of people strategy. It is really difficult to do internally. It's very time consuming. It's difficult to know whether you're getting the right feedback. It's difficult to do it in a way that actually gives you some actionable insight. So if you think about traditionally how exit interviews have been done, sometimes they're done by the manager. That's a big no-no as far as I'm concerned. It's not that I'm saying everyone's leaving because of their manager. That old adage, people leave bad managers, not employees, that just isn't true anymore. I can talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, I'd love
Um,
you to.
it's just not what we see in the data. But I think you've got to be independent, I think, is the big problem. So when you are a HR person, not only are you not independent, no matter how much you might be positively intended around people experience, you work for the business. They are your employer, and people know that, and they know that you're not independent, and they can't be honest with you. Also, I think people leaving a business, it's a difficult thing to do. It's a really complex decision. It's not linear. People don't leave for one reason. Generally, it's a very, very complex decision. Again, I can talk more about primary and contributory drivers further on if you want to. So it's really difficult to get under the skin of. And some of our exit interviews take over an hour. HR teams do not have time to spend an hour with everybody that's leaving a business. So you can't really devote the time to it. And then when you do, you're not independent enough in a lot of cases for people to feel that they can share with you the real reason that they're leaving. So, what people tend to do is mask the real reason because actually they're doing something they're finding difficult, whether they absolutely hate working for you, whether they like it and they've got other reasons for leaving. Resigning is hard. It's really difficult. It's like a breakup. No matter how much you want to do it, it's not an easy conversation to have. So,
Yeah.
what people tend to do is take the path of least resistance. So, I'm leaving for a big pay rise or I'm leaving for a big promotion because they know that your company is not going to match that. So, they tell you what they think you need to hear to just let them walk out of the door as quietly and as nicely as possible. But then all you're doing really is ticking that box, you're getting some feedback, but then often you're getting it in the form of a written document, a Word document, and it goes on someone's file. And then how do you pull that information together to actually make it workable and insightful? And then I think the final thing really is even if you are doing it well, and not many companies are because it's difficult to do, I think, as a human, which we all are, if you've been responsible for employee experience in your business and someone is dissing it and telling you that they've not had a great experience, it's really hard to hear without bias. And also, because we want people to have a nice experience, if someone's had a horrible experience, say at the hand of a manager or a colleague or a process or wherever it might be, our human instinct says, must fix it, must get on top of that and must fix it. So we tend to get drawn to the extremes of feedback and often go down rabbit holes trying to fix might be what might be one person's experience or two people's experience, all the while missing the much broader theme that's causing you about 80% of your attrition because we're just naturally drawn to the most horrible experience because we want to put that right as humans. So I think it's massive. The question you've asked is
Yeah.
just massive, but there's so many different parts to it, but it's very, very difficult to do. And I think that's the reason why.
The managers piece, that people leave their managers, not organizations. That's got to be. Just tell me more about that. That sounds, yeah. That's, I love that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So I always thought that. And to be fair, when we started My Say, that's exactly what we would see. So we started in the care sector. Our first ever client was a care sector business. And we'd been doing some HR recruitment for them, and they asked if they could borrow one of my team to do some exit interviews because they knew they had an issue and they couldn't get to the bottom of it. So we did that, and that's where My Say grew from. Um, and at the time, this was pre-COVID. It was about 8, 9 years ago. And to be fair, whenever we got to the section that was about my manager, because our exit surveys mirror engagement surveys, they're not just about why did you leave, they're about your whole employee experience because it's such a rich source of information and insight. Whenever we got to the my manager section, it was almost like, okay, put your hard hat on, grab a glass of wine. This is going to be emotive. Just, there's a lot to read. And that's what it was. People were talking about their managers. What we saw during COVID, and we haven't really seen return to how it was before, was a shift of where people were attaching their negative sentiment. So sometimes it's their manager, but actually, more often than not, what we see is managers have more aligned themselves with their teams. I think there was a part of COVID where we were like, we're in this together. So it became less hierarchical between your manager and the team. But the gap between colleagues, employees, and managers and leadership seems to have grown. So what we see is that kind of high sentiment, anger almost towards why my work experience isn't great has moved from the manager in a lot of cases to the leadership. So people will say, I've not had one-to-ones and feedback or anything from my manager, and people do expect that more now. They want that, and we see a lot of people not getting it in the data. But they're saying, I get no time with my manager, or this happened with my manager, or my manager did this. But then they will often go on to say, but it's not my manager's fault. They tried their hardest, but the company make it really difficult for them to do a good job. They're too stretched time wise, or the leadership just don't listen to them. So there just seems to have been this shift. And I don't think people are leaving bad managers. I think people are leaving bad businesses
Hmm.
and bad
Wow.
experiences.
Interesting. Is there? Do you think there's an element of people just being more willing to share that information? Where in the past, managers wouldn't maybe want to share that kind of information, but there's a bit more openness about their own experience and having that relatability
100%.
with your team as a manager. Maybe that's accelerating that.
I definitely think so. I mean, one of the age-old challenges, isn't it, with business is that people get promoted into management roles, but they don't have the management skills. They get promoted because they're good at their job. We still hear this, you don't have to be in my line of work to know that there's still a challenge with kind of middle management level um, quality of managers. And we see it not just in the My Manager section, but in the learning and development sections of our surveys about the recognition and the feedback and everything that people are craving and not getting. But I do think that, we've had all kinds of things like cost of living crisis. If you imagine those managers are probably not earning that much more than their team these days. It's not like they're turning up in a
Mm,
gorgeous car and into a delegated parking space. They're just like
mm,
you and me, when we're all in this together doing similar jobs. And so, yeah, I think there's much more of a kind of camaraderie with their team than there are with the leadership, and that then leads to this disconnect where it's almost like the leadership are now doing two things to us that are affecting our well-being. And also I think there's just been a change in employee expectations as well, which plays into this. The days of just expecting people to come to work and do a good job because you pay them, they've gone.
mm.
It's just not like that anymore. People want.
Generational thing, you think? I mean, is it
Mm,
is that it? Do you think?
Do you know what? I think it's partly it, but actually, no. I mean, when we see the breakdown of what matters to people, and also in my other life as a recruiter, I don't really see younger people telling me they want that much more, the things that are that much different to older generations. I think COVID played a big part in it. I just think it made us realize that actually, if you're my generation, so I'm 50, I know I must have started recruiting when I was like 2, right? But
Exactly.
anyway,
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
I'm 50, and I think, we there was just a way of working. You went in, if you were expected to do minimum 9 to 5, 5 days a week on site. There wasn't the flexibility. You made the decision to have a family, you knew you weren't going to see them because you were working, or you were going to go part-time, which was going to dramatically reduce your career progression if you could find a part-time job. People just aren't willing to do that anymore. They've experienced something different. We went through something horrible, but in that time, we realized that actually work and life can coexist. They don't have to be two separate things where you go to work and then you switch off and you come home. Now, there's good and bad things about that, but we're seeing in people that they want to be developed, to feel like I'm going to grow, to feel like I'm going to get more out of work than just coming to work and getting a salary and going home. I think there are generational differences, but actually just in general, people's expectations of employers and what they want from a company and the questions they ask us as a recruiter about what is that company like to work for have changed and shifted. And it's much more about, what is the culture like? Are there areas of development for me? And career development is the number one reason we see for people leaving and joining businesses. And it doesn't have to be about promotion, it's about personal growth. I
Yeah.
just think we've changed as people.
So I think that's one of the main areas where employees get it wrong is when they promise career development and personal development and they don't actually deliver it. And I think that's probably what comes out in your
Hmm.
MySay stats, which is, I suppose, well, which is wrong, and it's like that should be fixable because stop saying it, and but
Hmm.
also when you look at the kind of data that you've got, surely what that kind of lends to is a like an aspirational program of work to go and fix these things. So if people are leaving because of career development, personal development, that should then come back and
Mm.
go right. Well, that is a key project, um,
Yeah.
and I think you're right. So instead of maybe going, well, let's look at the manager. Did the manager not make it clear what the pathways were or whatever? Is actually to go as a business. Are we making it clear? I would imagine that it's quite frightening for some leadership teams to learn the data that you might uncover and think,
Yeah.
oh, is it us? Is it the culture? Is it not the managers? Um,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
What do leaders need to do? From what you've seen, I'm sure you would have seen that there are things that, because people listen to this, we're not just looking at people who are in talent acquisition,
Mm.
hiring managers. Actually, it's a good thing about the whole thing about engaging care talent is everyone in organizations has a vested interest in this.
Yeah.
So things like for any like leaders who are listening here, it's like, so based on what you're saying, what is it that leaders need to do to really kind of take hold of this and fix it if they've got those kind of problems?
Yeah. Do you know what? It's a really good question. So, first of all, I think leaders need to be brave enough to hear the feedback. Um, and they need to understand that there are ways of getting the feedback that they may not be aware of at the moment. So what we see actually a lot at the moment is HR people really understanding the value of what MySay does and that kind of promoting employee voice, but leadership pushing back and going, well, can't HR just do it? And I think leaders need to realize a number of things actually that they drive the culture for a start. All of this stuff about bottom up culture, it's great, but actually, you have to create a culture of enabling employee voice, of people being able to speak and be heard, and then actually doing something with it. So, some of the things we talk about at MySay is the feedback action gap. Are you asking but then doing nothing? If people don't feel any different, but then people could perceive that if you're asking the wrong questions at the wrong time and you're not acting on the right things, they're giving you the wrong information. So I think leaders need to, first of all, be open to this, not just open to it, but see it as a crucial part of what they do and understand the value of having strong employee voice, a culture of openness, giving people the courage to speak and the freedom to speak, um, because that isn't just about attracting people and retaining people. This is about safeguarding in your business. So if you think about care as a an example, you're taught this is an engaging care talent podcast. Care workers, support workers, they the responsibility that they have and the responsibilities that those organizations have and all of the safeguarding risks and everything that they have to mitigate, if you don't have a culture of people being open and not afraid to speak, you actually are putting your business at risk, because if they see something and they're too scared to say it, then actually there are huge risks just operationally within your business. Can you imagine if you have an airline where there's a pilot turning up every day and they're drunk, but everybody on that plane is too scared to say anything? That's a massive, massive risk.
Yeah.
And it's the same in any sector, in care sector. If there's somebody in that care setting that, say it's a manager or a supervisor, and they are making people feel that they can't speak up, but there's something going on in that care setting, you're not going to hear about it until it's a massive problem that's possibly affecting your business reputation. So I think we have to think of it as leaders, and I'm a leader of a business. So I think we have to think of it beyond just caring about how people are at work if that doesn't float your boat. It matters to me and it matters a lot to HR people. But even if you're just a highly commercial leader, having a culture of um, open employee voice and people feeling free to speak will safeguard your business. It will also commercially value your business in terms of advocacy, which is something that I bang on about all the time at the moment and is really underrated. I can come back to that. But leaders need to understand that getting this voice, I think leaders are used to engagement surveys. That's what they see as feedback. So with engagement surveys, what you get is people's opinions on how they view your business. With things like with event-based surveys like starter and leaver interviews, what you understand is how people feel and why they're making those decisions. You don't get that from engagement. So, really getting under the skin of it, but being brave enough and open enough to hear the feedback and hear it in a way that makes people think, I'm glad I shared that and I can see how that's going to have a benefit for me or for our residents or for whoever that might be. So, again, be brave, be vulnerable, but understand the importance of it. Don't just do it because you're lovely, because not all leaders are. Do it because you're commercial and you can see the benefit to your organization, I would say.
Actually, that's and also there's that thing about being open to other people's opinions, or what do you think as a leader. There's that danger of wanting to have all the answers, or feel that you have to have all the answers,
Yeah,
but that openness can be, well, what do you think? So actually, that,
yeah,
even without, that can then feed into people
yeah,
feeling safer to share their thoughts, whether it's how they
yeah,
feel about their experience at work, or whether it's even contributing to ideas. And
yeah.
that definitely adds to the whole engagement piece, definitely.
And show your vulnerability as a leader as well, I think is huge. That's nothing to do with listening really, but it's showing that we're all human and that even as leaders, we don't always have the answers and that everyone is allowed to make mistakes. So I think leaders often feel that they have to know everything, they have to have the answers for everything, they have to be the ones driving. And of course, it's a leader's job to lead, but I think it's a leader's job to show you vulnerabilities, and because then it allows everybody else to do that too. You don't have to be perfect all the time,
I think that's a
so it's a
really
big
good
thing.
point. I read a really interesting book recently called Radical Candor, and it was all about this. It's because if
Mm,
you allow people to be candid with you because you're candid with them,
yeah,
but you do it from a point where you're genuinely caring for them,
yeah,
it creates a completely different environment to,
yeah,
it kind of puts an end to people just saying yes to you. Yep, you're right. And you go along as a leader thinking, oh, great,
yeah,
I'm making the right decisions, etc. When everyone's behind your back's going, they haven't got a clue. It'd be horrible,
yeah.
wouldn't it?
Well, it would, and I think that leaders, it is hard to be vulnerable, and it is hard to show that sometimes you don't get everything right, um, or that things affect you. But ultimately, business is where everybody has a shared goal that they're striving towards. So, again, in care, everybody should be striving towards the goal of giving their residents, their dependents, whoever it is they're caring for, the best care that they can. That should be the leadership goal. And that should be their goal because that's how you win business. Do you know, at the end of the day, if you deliver really good care, you would hope that leaders in the care sector do it also because they care about standards of
Yeah,
care. But even if they don't, and they want to just make money, the way to do it is by delivering great care
yeah,
and having a great reputation and having the best outcomes for your customers. That's the same in any business model at the end of the day, isn't
yeah.
it? But I know from doing exit interviews with people in the care sector for years and years and years, and not just care, actually, any kind of health related sector that we work in, mental health, we work with some charities in that sector. One of the big things that they get frustrated about, and one of the themes that comes out of that is profit over people.
Yeah.
Um, and so then you've got a group of people that want to go in to deliver care because let's face it, I've been an internal recruiter in care as well. You sell it on purpose, the power of purpose. That's what we all want. Come and make a difference to people's lives, blah, blah, blah. And then you get in, you find out you're not making a difference to anyone's life because the processes, the staffing, and the shifts and everything, it's so difficult that actually people leave not necessarily always because the work is hard and the hours are long, but because they don't feel like they're having that impact that they were told they could have on someone's life that drew them into that job in the first place. Because no one's coming for the money, let's be honest.
The scary thing there is that you might lose somebody from your organisation, but we might lose somebody from the care sector. In fact, we quite often do,
Yeah,
because they come in thinking, "Yeah, this is what I want. I want to have a meaningful job." And when, like you say, it's not as you thought it was, you go, "Okay, I'll do something different then." So
yeah.
I'm really interested in a little bit more about the key themes. So I've read, I don't know how long ago it was now, but it was a big, reputable job board survey that said
Hmm.
people leaving their jobs because they're managers, because of pay, and because of career development. And you've already busted that myth. So I've just learned something today. So I'm just wondering, what are the key reasons? What are the standout reasons that people do leave their jobs?
Yeah. So it does vary across employer, but I would say never. We've only got one customer where pay shows up as a main driver. It's never up there generally in our top five primary drivers. So we break down the decision making, whether it's joining or leaving, into primary decision drivers and contributory decision drivers. And what we tend to see with primary drivers for leavers is that they are pull factors. So they're, what is this new company offering me? So that could be pay, but it's net, to be honest, rarely in the top five of the final decision. Career development is a big one at the moment. So career development is the main one that we see. But again, that can be about growth. And I should say that when we talk about career development and then you look at the comments that sit behind it, it's not people saying, I want a promotion, I want a promotion, I want a promotion. It really isn't. It's people saying, I want to feel valued and invested in. That's what people want, I think. And sometimes people make the mistake of looking at the data and really looking at the numbers without looking at the sentiment behind it, because if you can fix the sentiment, you'll have a much bigger impact much more quickly than you will if you just go after the numbers. So career development and work life balance, I would say you could basically break it down into those two reasons that are usually variations of those in the top five. I want to feel invested in, I want to feel like I'm going to grow, and I want to have a life, and I want to be able to live my life. Um,
Really, really
wi-
interesting.
yeah, with contributory factors. So, um, like I say, the primary drivers tend to be pull factors. And the reason for that is that nobody really just disengages overnight. Very rarely does someone wake up in the morning and go, "Oh, God, I've just realized I hate my job. I think I'll leave." That's not what really happens. It's a very complex decision. So the contributory drivers are where you want to look, and that's where you usually find your push factors. So push factors are the things that you are doing as an employer to push people out of your business. Now, with pull factors, there's only so much you can do about those. It's good to interview your starters so you understand what your pull factors are. So, what drove people to your business in the
Yeah.
first place? But with your levers, if someone's left you to go to an employer that's just got a cracking reputation, there's not really very much you can do about that. So where I'm sat in the Northeast at the moment, in the retail sector, for example, something comes up in Greg's in the head office, you're probably going to go for it because they are amazing and they're doing amazing things. There's nothing you can do. That's
Yeah.
that's just that's what they're doing. When it comes to your push factors, your contributory drivers, that's where you can really make a difference. So, what we see with contributory drivers is people can choose as many of those in our survey as they want because making a decision to leave a business is a complex, multifaceted decision. It's not I want more pay, I'm going. I want better shifts, I'm going. There will be other things that drive someone to that point that they can be pulled by another employer into their business. And we do see pay appearing in there. Usually, again, it's never the top one. It's always a consideration because when would you not consider pay if you're looking
Yeah.
at a new job? But again, we see similar things. We see career progression and development or lack of career progression and development. We see lack of flexibility, hybrid, that kind of thing. But what we often see creeping into the contributory factors alongside that is the workplace environment, the culture that I'm working in. That's where you start to see this coming in. So, because people will leave your culture. So we tend to see that creeping in there as well. So you'll see someone will choose one primary, but they might choose 10 contributory drivers that got them to that point. Because what tends to happen is people start to become unhappy and they go on this kind of journey of, okay, well, that's not getting any better. So I'm now even more unhappy. And because I'm
Yeah.
unhappy, I've now noticed this. And because I'm unhappy, I've spoken to this person who's also unhappy and they said they're unhappy with this. And I hadn't realized that, but now I'm unhappy about that. And it kind of grows until they bounce over into the totally disengaged part of the engagement disengagement journey. And then they go and
Yeah.
they will then be pulled to something else. Sorry, very wordy answer, but
No, no, it's
that's what we
brilliant.
see.
So another question I've got is: so if you've got two companies next to each other, and what is my question? So if you know what the top reasons are, the pull and push
Mm,
generally,
mm.
so you've just described them really well. Um, what what do you see big differences between one company to the next company when they've gone through the MySay? Um, is there enough difference for them to do the survey to be really valid and to inform what they have to do? Does that make sense? What I'm asking or not?
I'm not sure. Um, I, I mean, I think what you're saying is so. What we see generally is I think this is what you're asking, but we do surveys for lots of businesses and lots of organizations. And actually, the contributory and primary drivers across those organizations tend to be really similar.
Yeah,
They don't vary that much because this isn't necessarily about those organizations, it's about the people.
yeah,
And as people, we don't necessarily want things that are that different. Where the difference comes is that EVP. And I think this is where companies that understand their own pull factors. And so they know how to turn those up and down in their EVP and their I mean, this is your world, Rowan, in their
yeah,
marketing and really bring that to life for people. That's where you can really make a difference. And I would love it if employers were taking more control of their narrative in that space rather than leaving it to people going on Glassdoor and writing reviews because we
yeah,
know people are more inclined to leave negative feedback. So you're not necessarily seeing the true picture. So what people want doesn't necessarily change. How they perceive they're going to get it from their employer does.
yeah.
So it's about, and this is where advocacy, I think, is so underutilized as
Talk
a
to us about that
recruitment
then.
tool and as a retention tool. So when we first started doing starter and leaver interviews, honestly, we thought the people are going to use us. Well, It'd be lovely if everyone used us. But we thought the people that are going to use us are going to use us because they've got an attrition challenge, and we thought that's what it would be. What we hadn't really foreseen was the clients that use us because they're in a sector where talent is in really high demand. Either it's a big skill shortage, whatever, like tech, for example. So one of our customers, a company called Opencast, I can be open about them because they've written a blog about this and it's on our website. They do it for advocacy. They have really low leaver numbers, really low. They're such a great place to work. They do some brilliant stuff that's absolutely in line with the feedback that we see from people and what they want from an employer. But people do leave because they're in tech and they want to try different tech and different
Mm.
tools and they want to feel that they can grow. What Opencast do is they know that when those people go, they might come back at some point, or they're going to be talking to other tech people. So actually, what they've done is they focus on their advocacy levels as a marker of success in the business. It's in their key performance indicators as a business and as a people
Amazing.
team. What is our leaver net promoter score? We calculate that for them as part of our surveys. And so they can shout about that. I mean, their leaver net promoter score is better than some employee net promoter scores that businesses have. I mean, it's amazing, but they don't do it because they're struggling to retain people necessarily. They do it because it's inevitability that someone's going to leave. So let's send them out as an advocate and a champion for our business. It's a
Amazing.
totally different way of looking at it. And what a great measure of success of a business. If you're measuring your leaver net promoter score and you know that you're sending your leavers out as advocates and you can measure that over time, because that's the other good thing about starters and leavers. Engagement surveys are a kind of once a year thing. They're a one-off hit. You hear something, you act on it, or you don't. Starters and leavers are a barometer
I,
constantly of
I've
what's happening in your business.
I've never come across an organisation that does that. I've spoken
It's
to loads.
And when you think about it, Rowan, I mean, you and I, we work in the recruitment world, your marketing. Can you imagine how you could sell that?
That'd be
If someone's
amazing.
got a lever NPS that's better than most employee net promoter scores, and that's why I mean businesses need to take control of their own narrative. So if you don't know what your starter net promoter score is and you don't know what your lever net promoter score is, but you're patting yourself on the back for your employee net promoter score, but people are still leaving and you're still struggling to recruit, something's not right.
Yeah.
And if you think about care and where people go in those sectors, I mean, it will depend on the role, won't it? So if say you're a registered manager, I mean, I remember recruiting registered managers way back when I was working in care. I mean, they're like, they're so hard to find.
Yeah.
Um, and so we do see employers making decisions to bring in people in those roles that they know probably aren't as good as they would want or weren't exactly what they went out for. They just do. They compromise because they're so hard to find. Imagine if everyone that left your business was going out there to other care businesses saying how brilliant you were, how much easier that recruitment would be. And actually,
Amazing.
they probably wouldn't be leaving as much. But it's to me, it's like, why aren't people doing this more? I don't understand it.
Absolutely.
It's so
But
obvious.
the awareness of the sector as a whole, it'd be amazing, wouldn't it? It'd
Of
have
course it would.
such a wide impact.
Yeah.
One of
You could, yeah, sorry, go.
no, so I was gonna say, one of our early episodes, we were speaking to Simon Barrow, who's one of the founders of the concept of employer brand management back in the early 90s. Kind of called him the godfather of employer brand management, but he had like 10 indicators for employer brand management. One of them was you look after your alumni,
Yeah.
and treat them as, they're extremely powerful and influential, and you should nurture them.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's great. It's great to hear you say that. Definitely.
Red carpet in, red carpet out is
That's
the
it.
Yes.
the way that it should be,
Yeah.
really,
Right.
isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what people say. But
No,
yeah.
sorry. No, so
No, go. I was
I
just
was
going
just
to
gonna
bang on
say
about
that.
advocacy again because I'm just like, come on,
No,
people.
so I was actually going to jump ahead a little bit and just say, so if somebody listening to this wants to find out more about My Say and what you
Mhm.
do, what is the best way for them to do that?
Oh my God, you see, this is where I'm less comfortable when you ask me to do something like that. So, well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Maureen Brown. You can find me there, or you can go to our website, www.my-say.com. That's mi-say.com.
Yeah.
Um, as you can imagine, we love talking about this stuff, but we'll also be at the CIPD exhibition in Manchester this year. So you can come and find us there, come to our stand. And actually, we're just producing some benchmark stats and a report about everything I've just been talking about human employee voice, human sustainability, why people join and leave, listening strategies. So you can come and pick up a copy of that there if you want, or you can go to our website, and we're just about to launch our first white paper all about employee voice as well. So there'll be plenty of resources there when you go. Although I should say we're just doing a refresh of the website, so maybe don't go for another 2 weeks.
But you're on LinkedIn as well, which is good. So I think it's
Yeah.
LinkedIn is I think a prime place for these kind of conversations. So we'll definitely be tagging you on LinkedIn when we drop the episode. But I think there's something like, let's classic, let's continue the conversation. But LinkedIn needs more conversation like this, and there's practical application as well, because ultimately organizations need to do everything that you said, need to do it better, or need to, always look to improve things. So, it's let's continue the chat on LinkedIn for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
No,
I
brilliant.
would love my parting thoughts. I've got two of them. I would love to see how the stats that you've got from the UK compared to the US. I'm heading over
Well, if
to
anyone in the
health.
US would like to work with us to find out, we're more than happy.
Well, I'll ask the question. So I'm heading over to Health, which is in Las Vegas, a huge healthcare conference. And I've spoken to a number of people, and again, there is a perception that most people leave because of their manager. And I'd love to know if that's true, or whether actually, like Mo said, it's wrong. Um,
Mm,
I was also going to ask you a bit of a sideboard question, which is, so obviously we've been talking about my say, but
mm,
you do work in the world of HR and recruitment and
mhm,
recruiting HR leaders and talent acquisition leaders. There are a lot of people. So obviously we work in talent. It's engaged care talent. There's a lot of
mm,
people who are either moving job or out of a job at the moment. And from my point of view, it looks like the market's quite difficult at the moment. And I was just wondering if you've got any advice to people who are finding themselves in that position, who are thinking, "Oh, I thought I was going to get a job a little bit easier than I was." Do you see has the market changed, and is it going to change again?
Gosh. So every time someone asks me this question at the moment, I say the market is weird. That's how I see the market at the moment. It's weird. And it's been weird for a good couple of years. So I've been a recruiter for 27 years, and I've never really known it like this. So it changes all the time. And it changes from one extreme to another. So it goes from being really quiet jobs wise to really busy jobs wise, and employers reacting to that rather than realizing that if they behaved better when it wasn't an employer led market, they probably do better when it's not. But there you go. I think my advice for candidates would be the market is messy. There are jobs out there. It's not as quiet as everyone thinks it is, but choose your methods to apply for them. So if all you're doing is going on Indeed, for example, and applying for everything that comes up, it's going to feel like quite a soulless experience for you, and not every job goes on there. I think the other advice I would give is I think the biggest thing I can say about a job search is be intentional about it. And that encompasses a number of different things. But if all you're doing is going online and looking at jobs and applying for them on the off chance that you might be right for it, or it's there on Indeed, you are one of so many people doing that, and it's not really going to help you. And I think and it's going to become quite soul destroying if you're doing that, because we speak to a lot of candidates that aren't hearing anything back from applications. Really boils my blood, to be honest. Not even an acknowledgement. Like,
Yeah,
what is wrong with companies? I don't understand it. But I would say to people, if you don't hear back, don't take it personally. That is down to recruiters and volumes of activity, and some people not having great systems set up, or not being able to cope with the volume of applications that they're getting. And the same for feedback at the other side. Unfortunately, so many people are applying for jobs that it's really difficult. But when I say be intentional, I think know what you're looking for. So understand what jobs you want to apply for, and research the best ways of finding those. And if you're not finding them online, ask people for recommendations. Here's this advocacy thing again about who are the best recruiters to speak to, because I have a lot of conversations with HR people that I won't be placing. They'll get another job before I place them, but I'm always happy to help them and give them advice on the market. Find the recruiters that work in your space, and have a look on LinkedIn. Who are people recommending that will have a conversation with you and help you with your CV, or advise you on cover letters? Because those things are important, and you don't have to pay someone to do that. People will help you for free if you find the right recruiters. So be intentional about finding the right people that you can speak to. And then when you apply for a job, make an effort. Don't just have the same CV uploaded onto the job boards and do one click apply for every job that comes along. You've got to make yourself stand out, and unfortunately you have to sell yourself. That is the way of the world. So if you can write a cover letter, do it. Have a profile, a personal profile on the top of your CV that you tailor for each job that you're applying to, that really shows why you're right for that job. I know it's work, and I'm sorry to say that you have to do it because it's hard enough being out of work as it is, but you have to be intentional about it. It's, you are selling yourself, and you really do have to do that at the moment, because you will be one of hundreds of CVs landing for each job. And yet employers still are saying that they're not getting the right caliber of response to the
Yeah.
adverts that they're putting out.
Okay.
So
That's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, be intentional about it would be my advice. Put the effort in, take the time, apply for fewer, but do it really well.
And actually, that's really, I think that's great advice, because there's that thing about differentiating yourself and really just making sure you're tailoring to the
Mm,
company. And I think there's a mirror on there to the companies as well, which is, if you want to make sure you're getting the right applications, be more distinctive yourself, and making sure the content
yeah,
you're putting out there is really true to, God, many of the things we talked about, especially culture.
yeah.
And then that distinctiveness from both sides means there should be more of a match for sure.
I hope so. I think with writing adverts, again, this is more Rowan's area of expertise, but we were having a conversation about this morning. You know, you put an advert out, but really the value of what we do at Sullivan Brown is the conversations we have with the candidate. Because a HR director can be a HR director, can be a HR director, but behind each one of those adverts, there's a company with a context, and they're at a certain stage in their journey and a certain leadership style. So even though you are a HR director that could, it skills wise do that job, it doesn't mean that you're right for that business or that they're right for you. There's so much that sits behind it, which is why employer brand is so important. So you can make informed decisions about, do I really want to work for that company, and is it worth me putting the effort in to do that? And
Mm.
actually, do I have something for that company that they might not see in my CV, but absolutely resonates with something they're doing at the moment? So I'm going to write that in my personal profile. Just, there's so much context that sits behind an advert that is in play in a recruitment process, I think.
So, I mean, this question and your lovely answer was completely unplanned, and that's why people need to subscribe and keep coming back to listen to this, because
I know you just threw
some
it at
amazing
me.
advice. Yeah, thank you, Mo.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank
No,
you.
good chat. Thank you very much. And
Mm,
look forward to the report coming out as well.
yes.
And we'll be sure to share that when it comes out. But yeah, thanks very much.
Great to have you
Thank
on.
you.
Thanks, Mo. See you soon.
Okay.